Today, Biden speaks out on brutality against Asian Americans, but is that what's actually going on? We will lay it all out for you today, and it starts right now. Welcome to the news and why it matters. I'm Sarah Gonzalez, today joined by Stu Burguiere, host of Stu Does America.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, thank you. Wow.
It's great to be here.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate your warm and pleasant demeanor.
Okay. Also joined by Pat Gray, host of Pat Gray Unleashed, who, you're welcome, also, Pat, who is delighted to be here always.
Always.
Oh, I'm kind of getting a complex because every time Pat sees me, he's like, oh, you again. All right, let's talk about this, the shooting that happened in Atlanta. Now, what we heard originally was there was a shooting at a spa shooting. And of course, the storyline from the mainstream media was this was, a man who was targeting Asian Americans. This can't continue. All of this increased violence against Asian Americans, of course, from the Trump rhetoric of the Wuhan virus. And, this was what we heard initially. But as it started to shake out, the police actually, who are doing the actual investigating and gathering what we call facts of the case, came out, said, yeah, there's no indication that this was racially motivated, but rather this man said that he had a sex addiction, and that was why he targeted the spa. Was this like a special spa, or?
It definitely seems like the media is insinuating it was a special spa. Three different special spas.
Because I don't know how you go to sex addiction with, how do you merge this is a problem for sex addictions, but just a regular spa?
Right. It doesn't seem like it's a regular spa. At least it's not the insinuation you're getting from the coverage. It's tough. We don't know a lot. It's important to kind of start from what we do know, which is this is Donald Trump's fault. So how do we reverse engineer this story to understand why it's his fault? And that's how we need to understand the story. At least that's how the media is doing it. Because it is funny, you mentioned that the narrative up until today, which there's all sorts of actual problems with, is that there's this mass increase in Asian American violence by evil white supremacists who were listening to Donald Trump say Wuhan virus too many times. And they decided, well, if Donald Trump says Wuhan virus, obviously my neighbor down the street who happens to be Asian American should be beat up.
It's his fault.
That's kind of the thing we were supposed to understand. This is a totally different narrative here now that the police have come out and said, he's saying that it's a sex addiction. It is important to note, of course, we're talking about a mass murderer and we shouldn't just trust his words. It's possible that he is doing this because he's just a racist and doesn't like Asian Americans. Though the fact that he targeted multiple spas makes you think that perhaps he was attending these spas and would know that who was in there. The other part of this is after these shootings, he was traveling to Florida to go shoot up other spas, and it would be hard to understand if he actually knew the details of all of those spas as well, right? So it does seem like he had some sort of thing against he called it the porn industry. Where he believed he was going to, attack, these establishments. I don't know what this says, right? We don't know the actual truth. We do know that Keisha Lance Bottoms, a person who, an African-American female mayor of Atlanta, who was on the short list, supposedly, reportedly, for Joe Biden as a VP candidate, has come out and said, in our city, there has been no increase at all with attacks on Asian Americans. So this may be one incident. It may be one thing it may even wind up lining up with their narrative, but it certainly doesn't seem like the narrative has much meat to it.
Well, let me ask this too. It wasn't just Asian Americans who were killed, right? There were white people. 6
Asian Americans, 2 white people, and 1 Hispanic guy walking by who's in critical condition.
Okay, so that in itself doesn't really lend to the idea that it was a racially motivated hate crime against Asian Americans because Donald Trump said Wuhan virus.
Right. No, and I don't believe the narrative that there's been this massive increase either.
It's like they keep saying it, but I don't see
where are they getting it?
Right, I don't see the stories that correlate to that.
Yeah, where are they getting it?
Yeah.
Who's reporting it? Is it proven that these are all attacks against Asians because of the flu? I mean, Americans just don't act this way, and it's bizarre to me that everybody just buys into this thing that, oh yeah, they're saying that Asians are being attacked, so they must be attacked. Well, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't seem to connect that anyone would do this.
No.
Now, of course, there are crazy people. Some of this could happen. But we did a show on this on Stu Does America, appropriately titled Stu Does Asian Americans. And we went and looked at all of these claims. There's one group that is the source of almost all of the claims called Stop AAPI Hate. As of course you know, Asian American Pacific Islanders. Yes. And it's a website started by a professor in San Francisco who said, hey, if people start saying bad things to you that are racist or they attack you, tell me about it. So it's a self-reporting site. It's not anything that's like, doesn't go through, it's not
nothing's tracked down.
Nothing is official, nothing is proven. It's just people saying, I was walking down the street and someone spit at me, right? Like, and they said coronavirus. So I was, now some of those might be true. I would not be surprised. Look, it's a big freaking country. He says he has about 3,000 complaints that have come in. Again, it's a big country, so it wouldn't be impossible to believe that 3,000 idiots have called a name of an Asian American in some racist way as it's associated to the biggest, a pandemic that shut down our country for a year. Would I be shocked to think that that was true? No. However, the evidence underlying it shows that there isn't that much. There's been a widely reported stat that in New York City, there's a 9-fold increase in attacks on Asian Americans. And that is sort of technically true. It went from 3 to 28. So now look, 28 is 28 too many. It's a city, though, of, as you point out here, 10 million people and 28 attacks. We all would like it to be 0 attacks. Well, however, it's hard to wrap your arms around the idea that this is a wave of violence. And when you look at it across the country, all of these attacks largely are happening in big cities that are not exactly MAGA country, where Donald Trump, in Oakland, there was 18 attacks on Asian Americans. The police came out and said, we have no evidence that any of these attacks were racially motivated. However, Donald Trump lost Oakland 86-12, I believe. So it would be
close, is what you're saying.
Hard for me to believe that these guys are just out there with the MAGA hats on, running around town, beating up Asian Americans.
You forget how dedicated MAGA people are. Remember the 20 below zero time when in Chicago, Illinois,
yeah. That's true.
A couple of MAGA supporters were out looking for black people
with a noose
who were gay, with a noose, and
that might have gone to get a Subway sandwich.
Yes,
happened to find one.
Yeah, and they happened to find one, and that was ugly.
Beat him senseless, or
no, that didn't happen.
Put a rope around his neck.
Yeah, and he continued to wear it for several days. It's strange, but it does. A lot of this is that type of thing, right? It is a narrative that has been that started and then has been perpetrated and forwarded by large corporations who continue to fall all over themselves to make statements about how they really like Asians, which is just a weird thing to say. We weren't doubting you. I don't know what you have in your closet, but congratulations. I don't feel the need to tell people that because kind of feel like it's obvious I don't hate Asians or anybody else. But this is the thing. Even in Washington, D.C., 2019, there were 6 attacks against Asian Americans. And in 2020, there was 1. So as we heard from Keisha Lance Bottoms, there was no increase in Atlanta. This does not seem to even be a thing. However, if it was a thing where you'd have a slight increase in some of these cities, we might find that out on the FBI crime statistics later on. But as of right now, there's no reason to believe there's a trend of this other than activists telling us, and we know what happens with that stuff. I mean, almost always we find the FBI crime report comes out 18 months later. It says none of this happened, and we all just go, oh yeah, remember when we were talking about that whole movement before? And everyone just kind of forgets about it.
Right.
You know, I mean, the FBI, the data from 2018 shows that far more African Americans are responsible for attacks against Asian people than white people, despite the fact that there's 5 times as many white people as African Americans. That does not mean
You're racist. That's a racist
exactly.
thing
Does
to
not
say.
mean that black people are bad, but it does mean that there's not a overwhelming wave of white person toward Asian violence.
Well, and I do want to get to, in a second, I want to get to what the president and vice president had to say on this particular matter. But the statistics that you're bringing up in New York City and the other cities where there's an increase, do you know, like, does that jive with an increase in violent crime overall, or crime against, black people or white people or whatever? Because I'm thinking, okay, if there's also an increase, there's an increase in Asian American, violence against or crimes against Asian Americans, but that's kind of in line with the way that violent crime is rising anyway in New York City. Do you know?
Yeah, I don't know the split, but you're correct that there is a rise in crime overall.
Right, so I'm thinking, so if there's a rise overall, that wouldn't necessarily mean they were being targeted.
A big part of this is the numbers were so tiny among Asian American attacks that any increase looks like a very large percentage increase, which is what you're seeing in New York. But I mean, I think it comes down to, I remember 2001, I was in Florida with Glenn. And the story of the summer before September 11th occurred, the story of the summer was shark attacks in Florida. Everyone was talking about shark attacks. Apparently people were going on the beach. Every time they go out there, they just swim out and all of a sudden the sharks would come. It was global warming. We heard from the left all the time. We were antagonizing the sharks. We were developing too much. People were getting eaten by sharks, bitten by sharks. Everything was terrible. Then September 11th happens. And, of course, obviously all that, is no longer a story. A year or two later, 18 months later, they come out with a report of how many shark attacks. It was actually down that year. It was actually lower than the previous year of shark attacks. I mean, this stuff is just built into a narrative. And the narrative currently is that Donald Trump is causing attacks on Asians. But again, and we talked about this, Pat, on the radio show the other day. What are we saying about Americans? I don't know these people. I don't know who they are. I know a lot of people who thought Donald Trump was the greatest guy of all time, and they were really happy he was president. I know no people who thought, you know what? The Chinese Communist government hid the details of the coronavirus early, which caused an outbreak. Therefore, I'm going to go find somebody down the street who I usually see at the diner and instead beat them up because I'm mad at the Chinese government. It's likely his family fled. Right? It makes absolutely no sense. There's no logic to it. The New York Times had a big report today about all these Asian American attacks. You go through it, page after page after page of all this stuff. The only one, which was a white person attacking an Asian person with the saying it was about the coronavirus. There was one story they had, which was a woman walking down the crosswalk who bumped into an Asian person and then screamed at them and pulled their hair and said, "Go back to China because of you guys brought us coronavirus." Now, did that happen? Probably, but a pulled hair attack? We are now at pulling hair to direct a national narrative? I mean, it really is thin.
Yeah,
the same kind of thing happened supposedly with Muslims. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
During the Gulf War, after the Gulf War, during the second war in Iraq, there was supposedly this massive increase in attacks on people who were Islamic. And that didn't pan out either.
Yeah.
It just keeps happening. Every time there's some major story, the left makes up a narrative to try to blame Americans, and especially white people, for some sort of unreasonable attack.
And will there be no attacks on Asian Americans? Probably not. I'm sure there will be some. And
Just
they
like
will
there's
find
going to
some.
be attacks on white people.
On white people, too. But I mean, I'm saying specifically related to this. But if you want to go to a time where there were really crazy racist beliefs about Asian Americans, let me give you a guy who put a bunch of them in internment camps and is listed by every progressive complaining today that he's one of the best presidents of all time. Okay?
Point.
This is a ridiculous narrative, and until you take FDR out of the number 2 or 3 slot of presidents of all time, you have no right to come to us and bitch about our treatment of Asian Americans.
All right, we will get to what the president and vice president had to say on this after the break. First, we want to thank our sponsor, Newcalm, which I am very thankful for right now because I have a lot of stress in my life. It's a daily struggle, and I've tried a bunch of different strategies to help me manage my daily stress, including just like yelling at everyone in my family. But surprisingly, that didn't work.
No?
No. Isn't that crazy? The only thing that has worked for me so far is Newcalm. Newcalm gives you the power to slow down, get some distance. It's going to allow you to respond better to a baby that never stops crying. Ever. Ever. And doesn't sleep. All right.
This is oddly specific. Is this in the?
I'm just saying if
messaging?
I just think maybe if the listeners, if the viewers have that happening to them,
Right.
I personally wouldn't know anything about that. Newcalm interrupts acute stress at its source by bringing you into the calming brainwave patterns that are associated with relaxation, greater awareness, intuition, and provide a calming sensation. It is clinically proven in over 1 million sessions to improve your sleep. It will reduce your stress and boost your recovery. This is not having anything to do with drugs, does not have any side effects. It uses cutting-edge neuroscience and consists of 3 non-invasive, non-pharmaceutical items. They're all included in your monthly subscription, and it costs less than a daily cup of coffee. Spend the money on yourself, okay? It is not a lot, and it does so much for you. Do what I did, own the day with Newcalm, and make 2021 the year you manage your stress better. We have a special link set up for you. Go to whynewcalm.com and get 50% off of your 30-day subscription. By the way, they have a money-back guarantee. That is whynewcalm.com. whynewcalm.com. Back in a minute. All right, let's go to what President Joe Biden had to say when asked about the brutality against Asian Americans and the shootings in Atlanta.
Very concerned because, as you know, I've been speaking about the brutality against Asian Americans for the last couple months, and I think it is very, very troublesome. But I'm making no connection at this moment to the motivation of the killer. I'm waiting for an answer as the investigation proceeds, from the FBI and from the Justice Department. So I'll have more to say when the investigation is completed.
Can't wait.
Yes, and Vice President Kamala Harris had a little bit of a different tone as well. Listen to her.
The investigation is ongoing. We don't yet know, we're not yet clear about the motive. But I do want to say to our Asian American community that we stand with you and understand how this has frightened and shocked and outraged all people. But knowing the increasing level of hate crime against our Asian American brothers and sisters, we also want to speak out in solidarity with them and acknowledge that none of us should ever be silent in the face of any form of hate.
So basically, we want to wait till the facts come out, but also we pretty much know that you guys have a reason to be very upset about this because you were targeted. That doesn't sound like you're waiting for the facts to come out at all. It sounds like you're using this as an opportunity to be divisive again.
Yes, the facts are not important here. The narrative is being built, and this is where this is going to be the new thing, right? And look, if this ever happens, obviously it's totally wrong and horrible. But it's like you can't sit back and this stuff just becomes a thing without any facts. It's like, I don't know for sure if this shooter was really a sex addict and that's why he was doing this. He said it, but the police usually have an additional reason other than just the word of the murderer when they come out and make statements. But who knows? We might find out that that's exactly what it was, or we might find out that's not what it was. It's just it's hard to understand how this has been happening because it seemed to be one of these things that kind of came out of nowhere, right? I just all of a sudden saw Ben and Jerry's tweeting about it. It's okay, I'm McDonald's and Nike and HBO Max and Disney Plus. And
was it out of nowhere, or was it coincidentally after everyone got on to President Trump or anyone who would say that a virus originated where it originated.
Yeah, no, I think
Right, like it.
Yeah,
I feel
don't
like
think
that
it's,
those kind of jive at the same time.
Right. I think it's been a lot of pressure. I kind of was hoping there would be like one company that came out and just bucked the trend. It was like, Carl's Jr. is just like, I actually am glad Asians are getting attacked. They're just like, you know what? We stand with the people attacking Asians. Just to mix it up, because my feed is filled with nonstop people saying the exact same thing. And it's like, do I really believe that Metamucil cares about the Asian American? I mean, I'm
Deeply.
sure they do, but it's we all agree on this. You don't
care
need to
deeply.
make a statement about it with your soft music and the text that comes up really slow and it says stop hate or whatever. And now it's going really far where we're seeing people on the left saying, hey, you know what's a virus is not the COVID-19, but whiteness.
Whiteness is a public health crisis.
Oh,
yes.
good gosh. Oh, my
Whiteness.
gosh.
Well, do you know why those two? It makes so much sense
Oh, okay,
when
I'm
you.
sorry.
I mean, it shortens life expectancies. It pollutes air. It constricts
Whiteness?
equilibrium.
That one I do that. I am guilty of constricting a lot of equilibriums. I do that all. Pat and I do that. We used to go out on weekends, guys trips, where all we would do is walk around and constrict people's equilibriums.
Really?
On weekends when we weren't clubbing baby seals.
That's
I
true.
can't believe you're admitting
in
to this
Newfoundland.
on
Yeah.
national television.
Because,
That is shocking. It sparks and funds wars. It melts ice caps. It flattens dialects. It
Wow.
infests consciousness, and it kills people.
And by the way, we should mention this op-ed that you have here. This is from The Root. It ends with them saying, basically, kill all white people. Do you have the end of it by any chance? I don't know if you have it, but it's the last paragraph. He goes, basically says what you need to do with a virus with whiteness is just like what you do with a virus, which is isolate it, extract it, and kill it. That's what it's,
wow.
Oh, yeah. White supremacy is a virus that, like
Wow.
other viruses, will not die until there are no bodies left for it to infect, which means the only way to stop it is to locate it, isolate it, extract it, and kill it. A vaccine might work too.
the vaccine might work too. I like that. But I mean, and he does throw in the disclaimer of white supremacy, which of course all of us want to be gone and is largely gone. However, the title of it is whiteness, and he says whiteness throughout the entire rest of it. White supremacy is a poisonous ideology, and we all want it gone. But
There's hardly any of it.
either,
I have never met a white supremacist.
haven't either.
I've never come into contact with one. I've never seen one. It's just
have
so
you looked in a mirror?
ridiculous.
Or-
'Cause there
I
you've seen
have,
one there.
yeah.
You've
Or
seen one
Pat,
there.
if you have, they've hidden it so far deep down that you don't know it because no one is a white supremacist and they know that they would be rejected from society.
Right, because
Yeah.
it's so poisonous.
Right.
Right.
And that's what, of course, the actual goal here, right, is to redefine the word, term white supremacy into just white
people, yeah.
or at least white conservatives, because white supremacy. You're right. Like obviously, like I mean, are there people who do it? Yeah, of course. There's David Duke is still alive, as far as I know. I'm sure he still believes the same crap he
There
did
were like
a bunch of
9
years ago.
Tiny portion of our
9
society.
people who showed up to that anniversary of Charlottesville thing.
exactly.
I'm so tired of it. They act like it's this out of control problem, and QAnon is this massive organization when there's hardly anybody. Who do you know in QAnon? Come on, nobody believes that stuff. Nobody.
Yeah.
Very few.
All right, let's get to the Biden tax hike. The Biden administration is getting a little bit criticized today because, as you guys probably know, there have been multiple times where not just Joe Biden, but also his White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, has come out and said taxes will only be raised on people making over $400,000. If you do not make that, you will not see your taxes increase. Well, there's a little clarification to make about that.
What a surprise.
Yeah, I know. Let's listen to Jen Psaki first on Joe Biden raising taxes.
Depends on how much money you make. Are you a billionaire? Then you may pay more in taxes than someone making, a family making $425. There's going to be a range in any tax proposal. He talked about this on the campaign trail, and he talked about it during this interview last night, in part because it's on his mind about how to ensure people are paying their fair share, and that we are looking for revenue funds to continue to build back better. But I don't have a timeline for you on when you'll hear more. It's just something that he has long had a commitment to, and I expect in the coming months, or sooner than that, you'll hear more about his next stages of his agenda, but this is certainly part of what's on his mind and what he would like to work with Congress on.
She's really terrible. I would just like to say she's really, really bad. But
is.
she went on to clarify that this actually is going to apply to individuals who earn $200,000 per year. So the 400,000 is actually families, not individuals.
Shocking. I'm surprised.
Psych, just kind of like that $2,000 stimulus check you all thought that you were getting because Joe Biden specifically said, I will be sending $2,000 stimulus check. And then he was like, well, what I
not
meant
so much 2,000.
was you add the two together
Right.
and then you get the 2,000. So surprisingly.
You know who's really a virus are these Marxists in office. That's
That's
the
a
virus,
virus.
we need to deal with.
That
right
is a
now.
public health crisis. I would agree with that.
Yeah, and it's also a crisis for my bank account and everyone else's bank account. Now, look, because you look at this and you're like, well, it's just these rich people. They're making 400,000, 200,000. Who cares? The rich people. You know, at the end of the day, this will, of course, wind up being a tax increase on mostly everybody. Of course, it'll hit you in one way or another. In fact, their announced strategy hits millions and millions and millions of people who earn much less than that because it's got other taxes that are going up. They're just not the headline income
gains.
tax. Yeah, capital gains.
Everything's going up.
Not to mention
Estate tax.
if you die, you have this estate tax. I was going to say the death tax. Either way, it's all over the place. Not to mention, every single person in our society will be paying these taxes because they want to raise the corporate income tax from 21 to 28%, which studies have shown
along to
over and
the
over again.
customers.
Almost all of it is passed along to the customers. So every single person will be paying this tax, and they'll all sit there and cheer it because Joe Biden is he's not Donald Trump. Well, I don't see how that helps anybody. I mean, I think people who there's that sort of sect of society that voted for Joe Biden because they didn't like Trump, and Biden kind of gave you this idea that maybe he'd calm things down or whatever. And I think there's a lot of people in that middle, especially, who are regretting that, who are saying, like, I wish I didn't do that because, yes, maybe, Joe Biden isn't tweeting as many things and he's not on the front pages all the time. But there's a downside to that, which is he's able to get things done behind the scenes without anybody noticing. And they're going to try to push this through. I don't think they'll get it through this year, but I think next year there's a good chance that it happens.
Yeah. All right, we've got more to come. First, I want to thank our sponsor, iTarget Pro. Did you know in 2020 over 8 million guns were sold? Yes, that was, of course, driven by there were efforts to defund the police and rising crime, and that has driven the cost of ammunition. I don't know if you know this, if you can even get it, because I know there were a lot of places where you couldn't even get ammunition, but if you can get it, you're going to pay a pretty penny for it. So a lot of Americans are like, all right, I'm going to slow down on training because it's just really freaking expensive. You got to go to the range, you got to pay the range fees, then you got to pay for ammunition on top of that. That is why iTarget Pro was invented. You can train from the comfort of your own home, and this thing, personally, knowing how much I spend at the range, this pays for itself in one time you use it. It's already paid for itself in what you have saved just in range and ammunition costs. It's very easy. You download iTarget's proprietary app. You load the laser bullet, Pat. Yes, it is a laser bullet.
Yes,
you
it is.
load it into your firearm and you start training. You've got a target there, and it helps, dry fire training helps develop muscle memory, sharpen your target reaction speed, sight alignment, trigger function, and more. iTarget Pro comes in all major calibers, so you can stay sharp with all of your firearms. You can save 10% today, plus get free shipping with the offer code NEWS at checkout when you go to itargetpro.com. It is promo code NEWS for 10% off and free shipping only at itargetpro.com. Back in a minute. John Kerry, climate czar, that's what he is now, right? The climate czar, John Kerry, who typically travels on his private plane, with him being the climate czar and all. The only way to travel is by private jet. But now, I think this was yesterday, he actually traveled commercial, which was with American Airlines, where I believe both of you know that there are very strict mask policies. I mean, we've seen toddlers get kicked off with their families, babies get kicked off, people probably get kicked off or at least threaten to get kicked off if they drink their water too slowly, eat their food too slowly. These are very, very strict policies, which is why it was very, very shocking to see John Kerry flying commercial just yesterday on American Airlines. If we could show that picture, he's just reading a book I mean, unless he has an invisible mask. Oh, wait, I think it's dangling, but he's just reading his book. In the airplane.
Definitely, it's right there on his ear. It's dangling. You can see it on the side.
So, Stu, you're very into the statistics and the science of all of this. So how well does the mask work? I know we argue about whether masks work at all, but how well does it work when it's dangling from one ear?
But really well.
Really? Is that the way to use it?
Uh-huh. The COVID bounces off the wall and then bounces right into the mask. So it deflects almost all of it. I mean, like, and the guy who took the picture said it was that way for at least 5 minutes. So it wasn't like a quick sip or anything like that where someone took a picture.
Well, he was reading a book.
Right.
Could we just say, like, he's very clearly in the middle of reading a book. He's not eating.
There's no drink there in his hand. Like, there was a picture of Ted Cruz who was holding a coffee cup, and someone took a picture of him, like, look, he's not wearing his mask.
He's like, I'm
got a
holding
coffee cup
coffee
in his hands.
Right.
Yeah.
And let me just, I want to get your thoughts on this, but let me tell you straight from John Kerry what he had to say about it. He said, feels like there's some St. Patrick's Day malarkey afoot on Twitter. Let's be clear. If I dropped my mask to one ear on a flight, it was momentary. I wear my mask because it saves lives and stops the spread. It's what the science tells us to do. Thank you. I feel like my head's going to explode
This guy,
every time I hear it.
you know, he doesn't feel like he has to do any of the stuff that the little people have to do.
Right.
He basically told us that when they confronted him on the private jet. Well, looking for people like me, it's the only way to go.
Yeah.
People like you, what? Important people? People who do important things, is what he was saying, because he's flying around the world saving the planet from climate change. Same thing with the mask. He's not subject to these little people rules. He can do what he wants. He wasn't drinking there. He wasn't eating there. There's no reason for him to have the mask dangling. No reason. His explanation doesn't work.
Yeah, which again, I mean, I know that there were some people who were like, well, you guys are the ones who are saying we shouldn't be wearing masks. Like, yeah, I'm saying the policy that you people keep pushing on us, that masks should be mandatory.
It's the hypocrisy.
Right. Like, maybe the people who are pushing these policies should be abiding by them. And by the way, don't distract us by saying, oh, well, it's what science tells us to do.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the big thing is he's actually just acting normally, like most people would on a flight. Even when you go on there, you have your mask on. If you take it off, you take a sip of water or whatever, you don't probably put it back on right away. The other thing is he's almost certainly been vaccinated, right?
Yeah.
So like it really makes absolutely no difference. He's older and he has lots of power. He's almost certainly been vaccinated, and yet he's acting as if this does anything. In reality, he's doing the completely appropriate thing on a plane.
Which we all should be allowed
to do, and that's the problem, right? He's lying and he's being a hypocrite to everybody else. And there's this sort of signaling that he's doing something important when everyone on Earth knows he's not doing anything important. It would make no difference, especially if he's already been through this. It doesn't make any sense. But it is what you'd expect out of John Kerry. It is very similar to how he acts with the climate. Giant homes, giant luxury items, a private jet all over the world, travel everywhere that's unnecessary. All of this would tell you that he doesn't believe it's an existential threat that global warming is going to kill us all. But he has to keep saying that because that's his shtick. It's the way he brings in the cash at this point. And it should embarrass him, but it doesn't, because he really does see himself as another species. He's above us. It's like how you treat a dog or a rat. Right? Like, they don't have the same rights as me. I'm me. Yeah. And that's how he sees himself, and that's how the Democrats have seen themselves for a long time.
All right. Speaking of being hypocritical, and the Democrats, House Democrats, what was this? What is today? Thursday?
Thursday.
Okay. All right. It was
Pat and Stu Day. You should have known.
Yeah. Well, it took me a second. All right. I know the person who isn't getting that sleep because the baby's crying, and it's just sometimes it takes me a minute. But House Democrats Tuesday blocked proposed legislation from a Republican representative, of course, that would have required illegal immigrants released in the United States to receive a negative COVID-19 test. So again, this is something they are telling us your businesses need to be shut down. In some cases, schools still need to be shut down because we can't be too careful. This is a very deadly disease. We must be doing all of these things. But, oh, by the way, we're not going to require negative COVID tests for illegal immigrants. Seems like a pretty low bar.
It's unbelievable. They've already released hundreds of people into Texas who they know were COVID positive. They don't care. They don't care about the American people. The only reason they care about the COVID-19 situation is because it allows them the control that they want, and they don't ever want to give up that control. And if we have more COVID brought in by illegal immigrants, well, then they're going to have more control.
And doesn't it, I mean, I feel like with them, they're probably thinking, oh, it's just what Texas deserves. It's just Texas.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's not how a virus works exactly. So when you let people in, by the way, Mexico has had 9 consecutive months of 40% positive test rate. 40%
positive.
Just the 40%. Now, the U.S. has never been above 9.
Wow.
So 40% positive test rate. They've been testing these illegal immigrants in these, cages. They're packing them at 300% capacity, pre-COVID capacity.
Yeah.
So no social distancing. And they had one group that they tested, it was 26% positive, and here they are in the United States, all packed together. It's probably going up and up. They're packing them on planes, they're flying them around, they're transporting them to Dallas so they can be in the convention center. They don't seem to care whatsoever.
Yeah. All right, we've got more to come. First, we want to thank our sponsor, Patriot Mobile. In case you have not heard, Patriot Mobile has just expanded their coverage. It's going to make it even easier if you have not yet dumped your big name carrier, who's, by the way, charging you way too much money and then donating that money to left-leaning causes. It's going to make it way easier for you to do so. Patriot Mobile never sends a penny to the left. They will not silence you, and they are America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. By the way, it's 2021 now, guys, so you can switch very, very easily. They use the same network as the larger providers, but they are going to charge you way less. You can keep your phone number, or you can get a new one if you'd like. You can bring your own phone over, or you can buy a new one. You can build your own bundle with multi-line discounts and save even more. You got to go to patriotmobile.com/news. It is patriotmobile.com/news. This month, they will get you free Premier activation. They're going to set up the phone for you and get you a special gift if you use offer code NEWS. So don't forget that offer code. It is offer code NEWS at patriotmobile.com/news, patriotmobile.com/news. A transgender woman is now one step closer to being crowned Miss USA. Cataluna Enriquez, who is, I feel like we always need a flow chart for this, but this is a biological male, won the Miss Silver State USA pageant this week. And this is the biggest preliminary competition for Miss Nevada. And the outlet called it, of course, a monumental win for Enriquez. In an interview with the local news, Enriquez called the experience a celebration of womanhood and diversity, and this celebration of being your true self, which is weird because I feel like this is not a celebration of womanhood.
No.
Because the whole point is to be a woman.
Has there been the surgery? Have they done the, or is there,
I don't.
Does this person just identify, or?
I mean, he looks pretty darn
Looks like a
feminine
woman.
Yes, but
does look like a
obviously, this is they call it a monumental win. It's like, okay, well, if it's celebrating womanhood, then it's not a monumental win because it's just like all the other women. And if it's a monumental win, then I guess we're doing something new now, which is just tossing women aside for biological males.
I think eventually there's going to be a little bit of a backlash from women.
There have to be.
Competing against
They're taking
men.
our scholarships.
Beauty
for
pageants.
Our girls.
Yes, taking scholarships from women in sports. And now winning beauty pageants? Okay, now you've gone too far. Now you've gone too far.
I mean, you're going to take the beauty pageants from us?
Yeah, no.
It's a little bit different. I think, if men saying they're women and then playing in track, they're going to win every time. I don't think we're going to have a wave of men winning beauty pageants.
Well,
it's begun.
I will say, though,
it depends on how much money they've had to spend.
Perhaps. I would say the bigger indicator here is how many times have we covered Miss Silver State before? 0 times, right?
Yeah.
And look at the TV. Look at this. I'm looking at the picture over here. The first trans title holder crowned. No one knew this pageant was going on outside of the pageant community until you say, "Oh, well, we had a trans person win. Look how wonderful and enlightened we are." and then everyone jumps on and talks
And that's
about it.
why the trans person won.
And that's
so they can get
it's
this
why they
attention.
won. I personally guarantee there was a better looking female in the beauty competition than this particular person, though she seems lovely.
And just to say, she was very upset about previous discrimination that she suffered because she was asked to provide documents that were invasive. She said, I
How
was asked to provide
dare
documents that
they
were
do that?
invasive,
Oh, no.
in my opinion, physically asking me to get a letter from my doctor. It brought me back to a time where I felt like I was not welcome, which, maybe in a woman's beauty competition, men would not be welcome. I don't feel like this should be a controversial statement.
It shouldn't be, but it sure is. It's funny because they do this thing where it used to be that gender was determined by your parts, right? We all kind of knew, all right, that's a boy,
DNA.
that's a girl. Kind of understand how that works. And then they said, well, no, that what you're talking about is sex, and
Right.
and that's different than gender. As Ellen once, we used to play this on Patents 2 all the time. Whenever I would lose my definition of what gender was supposed to be, I would remember what Ellen says, which is gender is more of a feeling you have in your head. Which, okay, let's just say it's a feeling you have in your head. You feel like a woman. Okay. At what point do we have these beauty pageants that say this isn't a men versus women thing? This is just a biological sex competition. It's not men versus. It's not gender. We don't do gender here. We do biological sex. It's just what we do. You can go to a different one that talks about gender, and you can have all sorts of different people in there. But this one happens to be about biological sex. That's
Right.
all. You
Maybe we
said
can
it's
make that
different.
distinction.
Here's our distinction.
Yeah.
And you'd think that would be rational, but of course then they would say you're hateful for that too, because it has nothing to do with reality. These are just things to push the buttons and further a narrative, just like every other topic it seems like we talked about today.
Do you agree with Pat that eventually that there has to be some backlash from women who finally get it?
I do think that I do think so. I mean, if you think about how we're going to change things as conservatives, it's probably not on tax policy at this point.
Yeah.
They were mocking everybody over this. When the Republicans were talking about Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss and I can't believe they're concerned with those issues. Well, those sorts of issues penetrate to people who aren't engaged in healthcare policy, right? Wait a minute, the thing I grew up on, the thing I love all this time, you're going to take that away from my kids for what reason? And I think that my daughter's out there busting her ass training for a 100-meter dash, and some dude comes in and blows her out.
And when you have Martina Navratilova getting pissed off about it, now you're onto something.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen.
I think these issues hit parents and people in the middle who aren't engaged in politics in different ways, and it's why everyone tries to take advantage of them. But I do think that that's the type of thing that people say, wait a minute, this is insane.
Yeah. All right, we got to take a break. Back in a minute.
Keep thinking. Well, I just saw a poll the other day that it's men are more opposed than women. I thought moms.
All right, don't forget to go to wherever you get your audio podcasts. Look up The News and Why It Matters and subscribe, rate, and review. Because you love us so much, you got to give us 5 stars. Also, if you give us a cute review. I don't know, I guess it can just be plain as long as you give us 5 stars. We'll read it on air. We're very easy, very, very cheap as well. Let's go to one today from allcuomosareawful.com. 5 stars. Stu and Pat should take their show on the road. Love their sarcastic bantering.
Yes.
That's weird. I've never heard anyone say that you're sarcastic.
No, I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, I don't
Wow.
understand that part of it, but the 5 stars is the appropriate number of stars for that review.
Yes. Well,
That is
and
appropriate.
allcuomosareawful.com. I think
I like the name.
you may want to
I might want to grab that one
want to
up.
scoop that one up.
I already have
Stu.
AndrewCuomoIsAwful.com and ChrisCuomoIsWorse.com.
I like all Cuomo's.
Do you have Don Lemon is worser.com?
I don't know if I have that one or not. You can get that. You can get. There's a mug and a T-shirt of Don Lemon is Worserer, but I
Yeah.
don't know if I actually got the website or not. I probably should before this thing airs.
Is that for people in thruples?
Yes, in Thruples.
There's
You can
3
have
of
all
them.
3 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can all enjoy your Cuomo and Worserer Don Lemon bashing together as a family.
Yes. AndrewCuomoIsAwful.com.
ChrisCuomoIsWorse.com. And go to either one of those. You'll find the Don Lemon is Worserer thing there.